Federal cuts are still coming, and the states are reeling from what's happening. But here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have more federal workers than anyone else, and its impact on us will be far greater. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Lavelle, and you're joining us for our State of America series as we look at the impact of cuts to the Commonwealth of Virginia. As always, we'd like to thank you for joining us, as you always do, on this beautiful, beautiful Sunday. This beautiful Sunday where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. As always, I'd like to thank our supporters, and none like the supporters of the Spartan Nation, because we broadcast from this beautiful campus of Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA, airing here every Sunday. And you meet us here every Sunday as well. So thank you so much for those that are listening in this region, listening on the radio, listening on the TuneIn app, and for those that also click on our podcast, the YouTube page, to listen to the playback. So again, we hope that you enjoyed your week, enjoyed all that you're doing. And this month, as I stated, we're looking at a series, the impact on America, the state of America, and we're looking at the impact of what's happening federally on our country. Now, more specifically, we're focusing today on the Commonwealth of Virginia. With this, I want to point out an article that came out in the AP News, which talks about Northern Virginia leaders plead for states' help amid federal job cuts. We're also going to take a look at the impact of federal cuts on universities as well, especially research universities. Join us to have this conversation is none other than my good friend, and again, no stranger to the station, but none other than award-winning journalist and author, Dr. Will Aviz. Will, how you feel this morning?
Pleasure to be with you, Dr. Claville.
Well, again, thank you for joining us for this series. As we told our listeners, you'll be joining us several times to talk about the state of America as we begin to really break down and take a look at the impact of what's happening with these federal orders. Now, of course, we've talked about a myriad of things, and we're going to have a lot more to talk about, unfortunately. As you always say, do what?
Hey, get the popcorn, but I got to add to that. Well, it is Sunday. I don't want to tell people to drink on Sunday, but we need something stiffer. We need stuff. We really need to be paying attention to what's going on and take action now. So.
Absolutely. So listen, let's jump right into it. According to the AP News, just last week, article entitled Northern Virginia Leaders Plead for the State's Help Amid Federal Job Cuts. In Alexandria, Virginia, Northern Virginia leaders urged lawmakers on this last Tuesday to enact emergency legislation to help stabilize their local economy as the White House cuts federal jobs, which they said has sharply impacted the dense cluster of government employees and contractors based in the suburbs of the nation's capital. Now, in presentations to the House of Delegates, the bipartisan committee addressing federal reductions, local authorities described the job reductions as a once-in-a-lifetime overhaul of Fairfax County's economy that will push high-salary workers to leave the state. Now, Fairfax Board Chairman John McKay said the shift would impact staffing at other ventures, ranging from child care services to staffing at the local county jail. I want to read this last statement, and Will, I want to bring you in here. He says, quote, he said, "What we're facing here is far worse than COVID." He's a board, this is McKay, board member of the state's most populous county. He said, "COVID was an international pandemic that was affecting everyone. This is something that's acutely affecting Virginia and Northern Virginia." McKay added, "We got through COVID because we had a lot of federal support. We will get no federal support with this. In fact, it is federal actions that are causing these actions." Well, as of Tuesday, roughly 1,300 federal workers, according to AP News, employees and contractors have filed for unemployment insurance claims with the Virginia Employment Commission since the end of January. Secretary of Labor George Byron Slater, who attended the committee meeting, said to a reporter during the meeting. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more to unpack here, but I'm going to just stop right there. Well, it's getting real. It's getting real.
Hey, we talked about this in previous shows when we talked about the Trump administration's desire to do federal cuts. We said Virginia is going to be tremendously impacted. I mean, The federal jobs in Virginia is about 16% full-time, part-time jobs are federal jobs in Virginia. You slash into that, you are devastating, economies. You're just devastating the area. And like what you said, these are, in many cases, pretty high-paying jobs. So, you got mortgages, you got private schools, you got car loans to be paid. All of these ripple effects start to come into play. Fewer people going out to dinner. All of D.C. area and all those surrounding communities. I've got a place in National Harbor. They are all dependent on people, coming out, socializing, visitors coming in and out. There's a ripple effect to all of this, and it's like the Trump administration. It's like they're doing this, making it up and figuring it out as they go along. Like trying to go from D.C. to California with no map, with no GPS, just taking country roads and turning and figuring it out as you're going along. And this is not the way to run a government. This is not the way to run a country.
Well, we all knew that, right? But I was talking with a colleague from overseas just last week, and we're talking about how things are going in our various countries, and I said, well, we're doing okay. We're trying to do okay here, under the Trump regime, and he said, listen, it's democracy. That's who the people voted for, and that's who they wanted, and it stuck me because. Again, this is a person who's not a citizen of this country. He's been here before, but he's in another country. He says, that's your democracy. That's who the people want. And I told him, I said, listen, they may have wanted him, but they didn't want this, or they didn't think this was coming. But Will, I think what a lot of people are seeing now is that what they thought was going to happen to others is now happening to them.
Yeah, I think very much so, because I would even argue against that this is, fully our democracy, and this is what the people wanted. We know that the country is as divided as it has ever been, perhaps as divided as it was during the Civil War. So there's a lot of people who did not vote for this, and unfortunately a lot of people who just stayed out of the voting altogether and didn't understand as much as they were told. As much as you and I have had conversations with people who said they're not voting, we tried to explain to them that your non-vote is actually a yes vote for Trump, because his people are going to come out. So if you don't come out against and vote against that, he's going to win. This is what voter suppression is all about. Maximize your own people and depress the other guy, the other side. So, no, people didn't necessarily vote, certainly didn't vote for this at all, and those who even voted for Trump were just not really paying attention, and this under the illusion that because he's supposed to be a successful businessman, that somehow he's going to know how to successfully run a government. And this is not how, if you want to cut costs, you don't just cut costs with a chainsaw, which is the imagery that President Musk, Assistant President Musk has been moving around with. You don't do it that way. You do it with analysis. You do it with a careful drawdown so that you minimize this kind of pain, this kind of chaos that is just disruptive not only to Northern Virginia, but eventually the rest of the country and the economic system across the world.
Absolutely. Well, according to the AP News report, it goes on to say that this meeting comes as 100 House of Delegate seats will be on the ballot in November, along with the governor. 3 of the 4 lawmakers in Democrats' most competitive districts, according to a recent announcement by the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee that serve on the bipartisan committee. I said, according to a presentation by the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, federal jobs, get this, account for roughly 6% of the workforce in Northern Virginia. 5% of the jobs for the entire state. By comparison, such government positions account for only 2% of U.S. jobs, according to the Regional Commission. That tells me one thing. We have 3 times as many jobs concentrated just in one region just in this region, the most populous county, which is the suburbs of Washington, D.C., for everybody who's want to take a look at it. If you look at D.C., how it's shaped, and you look right below it, that's the city of Alexandria. That's the county we're talking about, So everyone tends to live there, or they tend to live right there in Maryland, or they tend to, around and so forth. So that's the most populous city. The most populous county it is, not city, but county.
And not exactly an inexpensive place.
Right.
By the way.
By the way, absolutely. It is very expensive.
Into the mix.
Yeah. So think about this. So now you're thinking about the real estate market, right? I mean, you thought that COVID caused people to, force lose jobs, or you thought the mortgage crisis was something. This is projected, according to, again, this is just not somebody with an opinion. This is someone who is on the board, the county board, Fairfax County.
Right.
They said that they need emergency legislation to be enacted. They can't wait. They can't wait till next year. They need it now.
And wouldn't that be contradict the Republican mindset, the Republican way? Isn't it supposed to be government cuts?
Less government, right?
Less government, and people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and being efficient. It's not supposed to be bailouts. That's what you essentially describe. He's saying, we need public assistance. We need welfare, right? But then when you talk about welfare, you talk about the single mother that's trying to feed her babies, that's a problem. She's called irresponsible. But that's essentially what you're talking about. You're talking about anytime the government is doing a huge infusion of funds like that and having to support budgets in various cities and all that. That's welfare. That's public assistance.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about public assistance on a large scale, and again, in one of the most expensive areas of the country to live.
Stranger things have happened, but this is very strange. Republican Delegate Rob Blockson said that, according to the AP, the House of Delegates Committee would need more clarity on how the workforce reductions would impact state revenues. But he did add that the committee should engage more with the Virginia Employment Commission, an agency overseen by, Brian Slater, which I just quoted. He said, quote, like the administration, hate them, we are all in this together, according to Blockson. He said, we really need them in the room to verify what they're saying. It's very easy to verify if you don't lost a job. I'm not quite sure what they're looking at wanting to verify, but maybe some more numbers, maybe the impact of what's happening. But this committee is really delving into it, and I want to note that the Speaker of the House and the Speaker Pro Tem, both in the General Assembly, they both enacted a committee and subcommittee under the auspices, the direction of the House Speaker, Speaker Scott, and of course, Senator Lucas, in order to study this. So the Democrats are locked in because they understand what's happening. Now, according to the article, it says Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin has created an online jobs portal for people looking for employment in the state, including a specific page for federal workers. In late March, Youngkin said, let me be really clear. Anybody who writes that there are only fast food jobs is not doing your job. Go to the website, pretend you're someone in Fredericksburg, Virginia. You might lose their job and find out your jobs would match that person's career. On Tuesday, former union leader for her agency's union said she worried that the former federal workers would still have difficulty finding employment in Virginia that would match their salary, even if there are available positions there. In other words, they're talking about a one-to-one match. Quote, according to the federal union, she states that federal workers who are getting their jobs cut, many of them are people with really specific skill sets, highly skilled individuals, but with really particular skill sets. And this is from Tofty, an economist who worked for the federal government until the end of March. He said, it makes it really hard to find another job in another field. The economy is going to really have to hard time. They're going to really have a hard time absorbing this many people. They also said, finally, that lawmakers on a bipartisan committee are speaking to authorities in different regions of Virginia to assess how these cuts to federal jobs and spending are impacting parts of the state. And the committee's next meeting is going to be in southwestern Virginia to look at this. But Will, I want to go back to this economist statement that said that these are very highly skilled people, and the economy is going to have a hard time absorbing all of these workers.
Right. Think about the message that sends. So you've spent a career, making yourself, whether it's education or training, indispensable in a particular area. You're making an excellent salary. And then all of a sudden, because someone just has a philosophy and a belief and a vengeance that all of this just needs to be taken to by a chainsaw. There's no careful drawdown of making these cuts in an intelligent way that minimizes harm to people. Mm-hmm. What message does this send? Why spend this kind of time getting that kind of expertise, getting that kind of specific training, if somebody's just going to come along and just chop your legs out from under you,
right,
with no apparent reason? This is the kind of thing that people just were not paying attention to when they're following these elections and going by the sound bites and just going along and not taking this stuff seriously, and just realizing that this is what you were voting for.
Yeah.
This is what you were voting for. And this is what the problem is that it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable over time. How, when you cut all of these jobs, then who is going to be out spending in our economy, which requires us to be out spending, and in order for the economy to grow? Who is going to do that? What's going to be the extensions of this? You mentioned people living in the area. It is not an inexpensive place to live. What's going to happen when people being able to pay their mortgages or continue to pay their rents? Then what's going to happen there? There are all kinds of extensions to this, and this is just sending a terrible message about doing the right thing in America in terms of getting your career together and getting your finances together and being a law-abiding citizen, and then your own government could just turn around and just cut your legs out from under you. I believe it just sends a terrible message.
Well, let's take a look at how this is going to impact higher education. According to the Virginia Mercury article last week, it said the Virginia Research Colleges are poised to face, quote, devastating consequences from federal cuts, according to an expert. Mm-hmm. Now, House lawmakers discuss solutions as Northern Virginia Community College offers help for displaced workers. But the article goes on to state, it says that Research College University in Virginia are at risk of taking significant cuts, state lawmakers in the House of Delegates and education experts revealed Tuesday, same day as we've had this. This came from the same meeting, by the way, as the country's executive branch continues to trim down operations and funding in the federal government. Now, according to data collected by the National Center for Science and Engineering, Virginia ranks 13th in the nation in research and development, or what we call R&D performance. Quote, R&D is important to Virginia, and changes in federal R&D funding and policies will have ripple effects on your entire state and the Virginia Public Land Grant Universities, according to Deborah Altenberg, who is the Vice President of Research Policy and Advocacy at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, the APLU. Now, Altenberg said every member institution has had at least one grant canceled or delayed, and there's really no clarity at this point or way to gauge what the full cost of those cuts will be, unquote. But the full funding institutions receive for their facilities and administrative costs could also be capped under the changes, which would be, quote, devastating, unquote, to the university-based research structure, since it's the, quote, major driver of our U.S. economy, unquote. The article goes on to say that the changes for research institutions come as lawmakers prepare for wider impacts on Virginia's federal workforce and funding reductions following executive actions taken by President Donald Trump's administration since he took office in January to cut what they have called, quote, wasteful government spending. So far, the number of available private sector jobs has declined, and the contracts have been canceled in Northern Virginia, according to Inside Nova. The state's community colleges have also ended DEI admissions policy in light of federal mandates, snuffing out diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, while the Trump administration has threatened to yank federal funding from schools that don't end race-based admissions policy. So, in response to the federal workforce funding and reductions, the Virginia House delegates, again, according to Speaker Scott, they developed this committee to focus solely on the changes in Virginia. Will, I want to dig into, there's two major issues here. One, the cut in R&D, which as we know, research here in the country is very important. And then lastly, the issues of DEI.
Hey, our institutions, our higher education institutions are, in many ways the envy of the world. That's why a lot of students immigrants come and study here. Mm-hmm. And then what we're seeing now with these cuts in the research dollars is how it affects the communities in which these schools are in. So, like I said earlier, 60% federal jobs contracting is in the state of Virginia. That's significant.
Absolutely.
That's significant. So what I hope is that happens is as they're putting this committee together, I hope that one of the things they also start asking about and start demanding accountability and justification for these cuts. Where are the receipts of the wasteful spending? Like, where are the examples? Like, we've talked about this before, looking at the Doge site. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's just tweets talking about what they say they've done. But where's the analysis? Where's the audit? And I hope that these politicians, develop some backbone to start asking those tough questions as opposed to avoiding the questions because they don't want to get on somebody's bad side where, their House seat now or Senate seat now becomes, at risk because they've spoken out. Where's the analysis? Where's the audit? Where's the justification for why these cuts are happening this way? And if there needs to be cuts, why can't they be done in a humane way that is not detrimental to the economy? That's what we should be doing.
Well, Will, that's what we should have been doing before the cuts. That's how you really, seek out fraud and you really seek out wasteful spending and things of that nature. You have an audit, but we didn't do that. We're doing what we're doing now. So, look, I want us to take just a quick look at a little deeper look at their uncertainty for research. Now, lawmakers suggested, according to Virginia Mercury, that Virginia research institutions may soon have to begin assessing their grant programs if more counsel are even lost. Now, they are fighting against the Trump administration decision to cut funds for research projects, but they still have to do the assessment. I want to also note for our audience that just this past week as well, the Supreme Court blocked an order by a federal judge in the western part of our country that tells the Trump administration they have to rehire these individuals who are temporary workers, probationary workers, not temporary, but probationary. So basically, the order is blocked. They don't have to rehire them, but now what they have to do is they'll allow the time to go by, the administrative time, and it makes it easier for them to actually basically fire them. So, again, they're fighting this, but we kind of, at some point, the legal delays and the fights are going to wind down. So the committee feared institutions may have to raise, check this out, tuition or limit research to address the potential losses. Now, quote, universities are really in uncharted waters, and each institution will need to make decisions based on their institutions, resources, and risk tolerances. Some of the top federal funding recipients in the Commonwealth include University of Virginia. They received $354.7 million in 2023, followed by Virginia Tech at $282 million, $0.1 million. Virginia State received 7.2 and 3.5 to James Madison. Now, think about this. You've just listed close to, well, just for two institutions, over $500 million per year.
Yeah.
Just in 1 year for research. And if you're cutting over $500 million in research dollars, or even, let's just say $100 million or $200 million of that, they said it. you're going to have to do what? Raise tuition or limit research to address those losses. That's a lot.
Yeah, and then, that's a non-starter for many families because tuitions are already too high as it is. So think about the trickle-down effect of that, of the many students who will not be going to college as a result of these tuition hikes. Again, we need our public officials. We need the people who are giving these, going forward with these legal challenges. We need the right people to be challenging these cases because the blowback that has come from the courts, a lot of it has been on technicalities. A lot of it has been because the people who brought the suit, they felt didn't have standing. So we need the right people fighting the Trump administration, and we need our public officials asking for real receipts and real accountability and real analysis because the trickle effect of this is going to be devastating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Will, I want to take just a few more minutes here, just as in our last few minutes, to take a look at it by the numbers. Now, according to the Virginia Mercury, let's break this down. The source is the Weldon Cooper Center at the University of Virginia. Let's take a look at how many federal workers we have in our Commonwealth. Federal jobs and contracting equals 16.1% of all full-time and part-time jobs in Virginia.
Yep.
Well, that's 321,516 federal full-time civilian jobs. That's 130,751 armed forces jobs. And that's 441,488 Virginia jobs directly depend on federal contracting.
Yep, that's what I said at the top. And so now think about those jobs, right? Think about where those workers go for lunch.
Well, first of all, I just want to put that in perspective because I know I threw out a lot of numbers for our audience. That's almost 1 million people.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about 1 million minimum wage workers. We're talking 1 million six-figure job people here.
Right. So six-figure job people who won't be going to the local restaurant as frequently as they've been going to, won't be shopping at some of the stores, may not be buying some vehicles. It trickles into the entire economy.
And that's out of 8.8 million people in the whole state. So basically 1/8, and we're talking about a population. So basically you've got about close to 1 million people that are working in the state that's connected to federal jobs, 16.1% of the entire workforce, which is almost that's really about 1/5. I mean, give or take about 4%, 3.9%, but you're talking about 1/5 of the working population. So if you cut that, let's just say you cut that in half or 1/3, the impact to that is tremendous.
Right, because and then you add to that the amount of people that those individuals touch in terms of in this economy. It's wide-reaching. So those numbers that you just ran off are mind-boggling in themselves, and then each of those individuals touch multiple individuals, touch multiple parts of the economy. So what is happening in our federal government? I mean, this business of just figuring this thing out and pivoting as you go and backtracking, this is just leading us down a dangerous path. And we gotta take action against this. You gotta take action against this.
Absolutely. So, Will, we were at our final minute, and again, we're looking at these actions here. We're looking at what's happening, making sure that our listeners stay locked in, make sure they're informed, because at the end of the day, what happens to our federal government happens to our community because all politics is local.
Right.
So, Will, you'll join us again pretty soon?
Oh, absolutely. I'm enjoying it, and I just want to encourage people just to stay faithful, keep your joy amidst all this chaos, because if you get too rattled, then you'll end up making too many bad emotional decisions, and we need intelligence and thoughtful decision making in these times. not rash decisions.
Absolutely. And as always, we thank you for joining us here on the State of the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.